Right, tonight I have the great pleasure of introducing David Hodrien from Birmingham UFO Group. He's been investigating UFO cases and related things since 2009, you said?
2007.
2007.
We've been running the group since 2009.
Yeah, Birmingham UFO Group was started in 2007 and he's been involved since 2009. So tonight he's going to give us a talk on a case that he investigated in Bicester, which is entitled the Bicester Abduction case. Okay, so you can put your hands together, please, for David.
Thank you. Oh, give me a second, got a little intro video to run. So we can get this up and running. Jumping over wires here. Right, let's get this underway. Right, fingers crossed that's going to work. There we go. Good evening all. Good evening Swansea. It's lovely to be down here. Travelled on down to lovely Welsh weather. Actually, earlier in the day it was nice and bright, wasn't it? But it's slowly turned back to normal down here. But my wife's family are from here. They're here tonight to see my talk, and it's really great to be down here to talk to you tonight about this case I've investigated. So yes, my name is David Hodrien, and I'm the chairman and lead investigator for Birmingham UFO Group. As Emily said, the group's been running since late 2007. It was started by a couple of guys in Birmingham, Craig and Mark, and I was one of the first members to sign up. It was like, oh, brilliant, as a UFO group within reach of my house, and I can go along and meet like-minded people, have a bit of a chat and everything. And it wasn't long before they took me on as the official investigator for the group, due to my passion and interest in the subject. It's something I'd always thought about doing for many years, just being directly involved and going and speaking with people on the front lines with this and hearing about real experiences from people. And it's something that I just jumped on with the group, really. So I started writing reports to the group, and then in the summer of 2009 they handed over the running of BUFOG to me as well, and I've been the chairman of that ever since. We hold monthly meetings in North Birmingham, where we get various speakers to talk. Some of which are here tonight. Hi Alan, everybody. There's Alan at the back, superb ufologist. And we also show documentaries and films and that sort of thing. And I really like to promote the kind of community spirit of these things, just like you guys coming down tonight, because a lot of people these days are kind of stuck on their computers and just checking out the subject via the internet. And it's really nice when people just come together to meet up properly and have a chat about this fascinating subject. So yeah, I mean, I've investigated hundreds of UFO sightings over the years, probably over 1,000 now in total. and I'm getting more and more known as being involved in the contact aspect of the subject. And I've so far investigated about 250 or so contact cases from around the world, over half of which have been UK based, but I've also covered cases as far as Australia. And it's incredible just the similarities that you get between those cases. And because of my interest in that particular aspect, contactees are now coming to me, so I don't have to go around searching for people and saying, oh, have you had an abduction or anything. They're coming to me directly off word of mouth and sharing their experiences with me. Quite a lot of the time those experiences turn into very detailed case reports that can all be found freely available on the BUFOG website. Other times it's very, very personal to the individual, and they just want to keep it to themselves really. So we just have a chat and help them out and come to terms with what's happening to them. And I've also worked with a number of hypnotherapists over the years on hypnotic regressions of contactees. That's a very, very controversial angle of the subject due to the introduction of false memories, which can sometimes happen. But it's still a way of exploring the cases further than what the individual consciously remembers. So where the option's open, more than welcome for them to do that. So tonight I'm going to talk with you about this incredible case, the Bicester contact case. And the case first came to me in the summer of 2014. So yeah, let's have a brief look at how the investigation went on this one. So yeah, initial correspondence came from Dave contacted me via phone after checking out one of my other talks on YouTube. I write regularly for UFO Truth magazine, and the yearly UFO Truth magazine conference, I was speaking at that several years ago. And Dave saw that video and got in touch and said, I've had some interesting things that happened through my life, and I'd like to go over them with you. So I headed down to Bicester. There's a little photo of the place, lovely place in Oxfordshire. Headed down there for the day, and we basically had a chat for many hours about all sorts of experiences he'd had. Visited a number of different locations to take photographs and that sort of thing. When I got back up Birmingham, started writing the report. It was extremely in depth. It's probably over 200 pages long, I think, and everything you hear about tonight, so everything I'm going to cover and many other experiences are in that report. So if you're interested in what you hear tonight and you want to hear and read more, just do go out and check out the report. That went up probably about 9 months later. It took a while to put together. After that, I did a talk on UFOs in the music industry, so kind of UFO themed bands and musicians who've had experiences and then released songs based on those experiences. And it seemed very relevant to get Dave and his band Cosmosis to come and play as part of that event. So they came up to Birmingham and played a gig. And you'll see the title of my talk, The Cosmosis Connection, and you'll find out what that's all about in a bit. I then headed back to Bicester on numerous other occasions to continue the investigation and just socialise with the guys, because we formed kind of lasting friendship, and that's when they're on stage at a place in Oxford, and they're going from strength to strength and still playing gigs regularly down there. So case aspects. There's Dave. Which Dave? We're both Dave, but that's yeah. There is Dave Hunt there. I don't know who this man in black guy is. No idea. So let's have a look at the aspects of this case and why I think it's such an important case. It's extremely detailed and it's occurred over a long period of time. In some contact experiences, the individual has 1 or 2 encounters over a short period of time and then nothing else for the rest of their life. But in other cases, we commonly term repeater cases, the individual has experiences almost from birth or from a very young age, and that's how this case is. It's extremely detailed. There's testimonial evidence we've got from many witnesses, and it's interesting that in a lot of the cases there have been other people present. So it's not all just taking the testimony of one person. This is just a massive web of individuals involved in this case that involve most members of his family, his closest friends, and other friends and associates, many of which I've spoken with, all of which back up the experiences that I'm going to tell you about this evening. So it's quite rare that you get that. In a lot of cases, it's just a kind of, you just have to take one person's word for it, and you can either sort of take it or leave it. But with this, it's the amount of people that we've got to give testimony. There is some physical photographic evidence involved with this case, not too much, but a bit in places, and I'll take you through some of that tonight. and also, yeah, an absolutely clear emotional impact on the people involved with this. This has deeply touched Dave, his friends, and his family in many ways, and really changed their lives. And you'll hear more about that as we progress with this. So we're going to start now with David's experiences. I don't know whether you want to break at the halfway point or not. Do you want me to split it at the half? Yeah. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So yeah, we'll go through experiences, and we'll get about halfway through, and we'll have a little break through this. But yeah, his experiences did actually start about age 2, but this one took place in 1979. He's age 3, and he's at a play group in London, which he used to go to. Right. So essentially, let me take you through what happened. So he's at the play group. He goes down there every single week, and one day at the play group, he decides he needs to use the toilet. So he tells the attendant there he needs to go to the loo. When he enters the toilets, there's some figures standing there. Now, obviously, he's only 3 years old. He doesn't have too much recollection of this, but he remembers there being men, tall people standing there, and they were wearing these blue-coloured sort of outfits. That's all he remembers. Next thing he knows, he's quite far away elsewhere in London, and several hours have passed, about 2 hours, and he's basically picked up as somebody on the street spots him on his own, calls the police, and they get involved, and then they find out who he is and get the parents, and eventually he's kind of reunited with his parents. So yeah, let's have a look at some of the aspects of this incident in more detail, shall we? Well, first of all, these men, these are men, but these men who David encountered. Okay, so the figures were standing wearing these sort of light blue type fitting outfits. That's what he describes. Now, it's interesting that he remembers that, because that actually fits quite closely with clothing that a particular type or species, if you will, of being wear. Many of you will be familiar with this. For those who aren't, one of the beings that's commonly reported by people, they're commonly termed the Nordics, or sometimes called humanoids or Pleiadians, because some people believe they're from the Pleiades star system, so they call them Pleiadians. But they're very, very humanoid looking, quite perfect kind of features, and they've usually got pale or white hair, usually kind of shoulder length, and they wear these kind of tight fitting sort of jumpsuits that are usually either blue or silver. There's other cases I've investigated where they've been wearing these kind of white robes when they're seen aboard craft. Now, these beings are reported very regularly, and a lot of people think that they were reported a lot back in the 60s and 70s, and they look all old and David Bowie style, and they do actually look like that, and they're still reported like that today, and they're seen almost as commonly as some of the other sort of types of beings or entities that are commonly reported. So, still a very major part of contact. So he manages to get outside the playgroup without being spotted. So the teacher's right there with the other children, just right next to where the loo is, and it seems inconceivable he'd be able to do that, walk outside. Around the outside of the playgroup were some very tall fences. This isn't the actual fences, but it's a representation of them that we found online that he says matched what the playgroup had around it. Essentially, obviously the children were locked in there. They didn't want random members of the public walking in while the playgroup's in place. So how on earth did he get over these huge fences? He's 3 years old, remember? So here's his journey. I hope you can see that at the back. Right, this is London. There's the River Thames flowing along there. And this is the point A here, when they line up, that's the position of the playgroup. And this is where he was found roughly 2 hours later. So he disappeared, no idea. 2 hours later, bang, he's there. He's picked up on the street. Obviously, that's quite a distance for a 3-year-old to walk. Yes, it was 2 hours, yeah. But really, can a 3-year-old really wander around London by himself, cross numerous bridges, cross the River Thames and walk that sort of distance at 3 years old without being picked up by anybody? It just seems inconceivable to me. During that time, he's not spotted by anybody, so if he was walking, surely somebody would have seen a kid wandering around on their own and picked him up, but no. And also, Dave's got no recollection of this journey taking place. All he remembers is walking in there, seeing these figures, and then his next recollection is being there. So, yeah, in my estimation, and due to his other experiences later on that have occurred, and the fact that he quite clearly is a contactee, I think it's probable, or at least possible, that he was abducted on this occasion and has the memories of that experience blacked out. For those who aren't familiar with contact experiences where people are sort of taken, they're quite often taken aboard craft, and a lot of the time the information is quite fragmented. They only remember parts of the experience, and in other cases they can't remember at all, and it's called missing time usually. And they appear to have their memories blanked out, and I personally believe that's something that the beings are doing on purpose. They kind of appear to be working covertly, and they don't really want the human beings who are involved with contact to know that they're having these experiences. But I could talk about missing time as for the entire lecture, so let's move on. So we're moving on now to 1988, and again we've got a scenario here where a possible abduction took place, and this time he was on the motorway with his parents driving, and they'd gone down to Folkestone down here. There's London up there. That's where he used to live, at point B, and this is their route they were taking home. So they'd gone to visit relatives down here, and they were heading back along the road, and somewhere on this journey this incident occurred. We don't know the exact location, but probably around here. So David's looking out the back seat of the car, just looking out the window, and all of a sudden he sees what appears to be a fighter jet, following after the car, and it appears to be matching the speed of the car. It's essentially kind of floating slowly, just matching and just hovering there in the sky. And he tells his parents about this jet, and they're like, "No, don't be silly, jets." can't follow cars, it just doesn't happen. So they carry on driving and they don't really pay much attention. All of a sudden everything goes black. Everything outside the car was completely pitch black. In the car he had some visibility of his close surroundings, and his parents appeared to be sort of passed out in the front of the car. They appeared to be unconscious. They're just lying there in the seats like that, completely oblivious. It also looks like the car's ground to a halt, and it's just everything's still and quiet and dark outside. And then David, he was about 13 or 12 or 13 by this point. He's got this vivid recollection of something approaching the car from the outside and opening the car door on his side, and that's it. That's where his memory of that incident ends. As I mentioned, a lot of the time memories of contact can be quite fragmented. So let's have a look at that in more depth. There's the M26 which they were on, so just standard motorway. That there is the type of jet that was following after the car. David knows it was that type of jet because he had an interest in aviation at that age, and he actually knew that it was that type of jet. So it's a fighter jet, Vulcan, and essentially, as we said, it can't fly at that speed. Jets, obviously, when you see them, they just zip right across really quick. For it to have been travelling at that speed and also following the car is just completely implausible, really. And we move on now to another area of contact, which some of you will be familiar with, but maybe not all, which is screen memories. Screen memories are where the beings appear to mask either their own appearance or the appearance of their craft, and they do this quite regularly with contact experiences. And the beings can sometimes disguise themselves as a family member or friend, or an animal. They're quite often seen as owls. Some of you will know the film The Fourth Kind, which was a kind of contact-themed horror movie, and in that they had the guy was seeing owls, and that was basically based on that. Other animals have been reported, wolves, even tigers and things like that. So they appear to be something familiar to the individual. With the craft, they will often disguise themselves as a helicopter or a biplane or something like that. So the individual, when they thinks back to the experience, they don't see a kind of flying saucer or whatever. They see a mundane object. And then sometimes through regression, they can actually see it in its real form, and they can actually sort of see the being as a being, or see the craft. And this is a very common aspect of contact, and I'd say a definite real part of it. And again, it appears to be something that the beings are doing. I think that they're doing it on purpose, probably to reduce the fear of the experience. And again, it's almost like they're going into the person's mind and finding something which is familiar or they're okay with. And for example, in some of Dave's earlier experiences, which I don't think we're going to cover here, he actually had a number of experiences where he saw soldiers in his room at night, and he had an interest in the army, and he was thinking about joining the armed forces and this sort of thing. And it's probably that we're sort of taking that form. So I'd certainly believe that it's quite possible this jet wasn't a jet at all, but was a craft following behind the car. Then there's this sudden darkness. This again is a very regularly reported aspect of contact. Interestingly, you've got either bright light or darkness with cases. Some people see everything go pitch black around, and sometimes when they're aboard the when they go away to what appears to be a craft, it's very dark around. Other times there can be blinding white light, and sometimes the beings can kind of step out of this light and take people back into the light with them. So it's very interesting, these kind of parallels. The parents unconscious. This puts to contact. There's a lot of time distortion elements to contact cases, and when you look into quite a few, you'll just start to see the similarities between the cases. And it's almost like they're shutting down the local area. Some sort of time distortion goes on. So, for example, let's say there's a man and his wife, and they're lying there, and the wife has a contact experience in the night. The husband may be completely sort of knocked out and unconscious, and she can go to try and wake him up. She can hit him and everything, and he just doesn't stir. He just stays completely asleep. It's like he's been blanked out. And I believe that they do that so that they can directly contact the individual without other people interfering. So anybody they don't want to be a part of the experience will not be. They'll be essentially shut down, switched off for a period of time. The sense of approaching figure in the car door opening tends to suggest that a being of some kind approached him and possibly took him out of the car elsewhere, although he's got no recollection of that, of course. And we got the confirmation from the father. Yeah, this wasn't too long ago, about 3 or 4 years ago. David decided to speak with his father about this experience. Now, his dad is very sceptically minded about the whole thing, and doesn't entertain the notion that these sort of things can take place. And Dave went and spoke with him about this experience and was starting to take it through him, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, he's like, oh shit, I remember the car going black. And I say he basically just came back to him. This happens. What happens is these memories that are blocked out, sometimes things can trigger them, and one of the things that can trigger them is just talking about back to the experience, can sometimes bring the memories back into the forefront of the mind. So his father blanked this out completely, but when he talked about it, he remembered it, and he couldn't explain it. He didn't take it any further than that, but his father did confirm that he remembered the car suddenly, everything going suddenly black. And of course, from that point onwards, with that experience, he was knocked out, so he wouldn't have any further recollection of that anyway. So absolutely fascinating there. Again, another abduction here. This is June 2000 now, and this is what we've termed Dave's trigger experience. And by trigger experience, I mean it's a particular experience that the individual undergoes, where it kind of opens their mind to what's happening in their life. Now, a lot of contactees, they have experiences from an early age, but they ignore them or push them to the back of their mind, or maybe don't interpret them in the right way, and they're there, but they know things have happened, but they just try to ignore them and get on with their life. And then they may have a certain experience where it's just completely obvious that something very unusual has taken place, and then often they'll go back through their life and they'll start to look at these earlier experiences, and they'll be like, oh wow, things are starting to fit into place now. It kind of explains why that particular thing happened earlier on. So this here, what happened in June 2000, an absolutely incredible experience. This involved David, his wife, and his newborn baby daughter, who was only a few weeks old at the time. Well, so they had an encounter with a silver disc. Essentially, I do apologise to you guys at the back. I know the screen's quite small, but I'll try to explain what's on the pictures now. So here we've got another map, and he'd been to Banbury here, point C here, Banbury, and he's travelling back to Bicester. So David used to box. He used to be a boxer, and he'd just been to a boxing match, and he'd hurt his rib. He thinks he'd cracked a rib, and he went to Banbury to get it checked out, so the doctor could sort of take a look at it and everything. And on the way back, they were passing this point here, which is a small village called Ano, on the B410, I think it is. And Dave's had a few experiences on this road at various points through his life, by the way. But yeah, they were there just travelling back in the car. And his wife's in the passenger seat, his newborn daughter's sitting in the car seat in the back of the car. And there's Dave's drawing of what they saw. Essentially, they're coming along here along the road. He said it was quite quiet on the road. There wasn't any other cars around at the time. all of a sudden this flattened silver disc essentially descends down into the view in the foreground of the car. Both him and his wife can see it clearly. It's right there, solid object, and they acknowledge the fact that they've seen this, and it appears to be again matching the speed of the car. So it just comes down and it's following. They slow down the car a bit, and at that point something changes. All of a sudden they're further on down the road. The craft's totally vanished, and they just basically come round and they know that something's happened, but they can't say what. Almost immediately, within minutes of this, Dave starts to get these vivid flashbacks of what he believes took place in the missing time. They checked the clock, and about sort of 30 to 40 minutes had essentially vanished that they couldn't account for. But all they knew was this object wasn't around anymore. So David's sitting in the back of the car with his hurt rib, and his memories start to come back to his brain. And what he remembers is being in a location like this. It's a kind of oval-shaped room. There's some banks of monitors with screens and things, and it's a kind of got a curved kind of a smooth appearance to it. He certainly believes he's aboard this silver disc at this point. There are 5 humanoid beings standing in front of him, again wearing these tight blue suits. And you can see that most of them are male. This one here is female, so you can see the difference there. And this central guy looks just like him, almost exactly the same as him, almost like his identical twin. Back then Dave didn't have a beard. He does actually have a beard now, but back then he didn't. But this being had a beard, and the only essential difference facially to him was the being's kind of hair colour was a kind of sort of dark grey sort of colour, rather than his kind of brownish hair. So yeah, the wife and daughter are there and next to him. So he starts looking around. His wife's to one side and she's like this. She just appears to be unconscious, just hanging there, standing up. To his left is the car seat with his baby daughter in, again fast asleep, but they've taken the car seat with her, and she's just there on the ground next to him. This central being steps forward, and they start having a conversation, quite an in-depth conversation. The conversation begins and is telepathic, so he starts to get these, he starts to hear things directly in his mind coming from this being, and the being starts explaining that it looks like him because it is him. He says it is his brother, is like a brother to him. That's what he said. He explained to David all sorts of stuff, a lot of which he wasn't ready for at this point. This just come out of the blue, didn't know what was going on. This was his first kind of vivid recollection of an abduction experience, and it was all so new to him. But the being was essentially telling him that they were experiencing the world through his eyes and through his actions and thoughts, and they had a direct connection with this being, and essentially that connection was going to go on through life. They said that this was a big program that is ongoing, and that numerous contactees around the world have got a direct connection with a particular entity, and they kind of share experiences, and they're learning about the world through these individuals that they decide to bond with. I have heard other contactees mention this before. Quite a famous lady from Australia, Susie Hansen. If any of you are aware of Susie Hansen, she's released a book called The Dual Soul Connection, and essentially she's talking about the same thing, this direct connection with a being. So very, very interesting. So yeah, as I said, the same beings as before. These are humanoids. Then he has this communication with the key contacts, and at this point it was telepathic, although in later cases they have spoken to him audibly as well, where they sort of move their mouths. So he's had both types. And then he appears to be returned to the car. This went on for quite a period of time, and the conversation was quite in depth. They didn't talk about exactly where they were from, they didn't talk about how they got there or anything like that, but they were talking a lot about how there's going to be changes on Earth, and that this program's been going on quite a while, and will continue to do so. It didn't all sink in. He doesn't remember everything that was said, but what he does remember is in the report. It's quite a lot. I'm not going to go into too much now because it's pages, but you can go and read all that in the report. Yeah, the after effects and reactions. Right, so he starts getting these flashbacks, and the experience really affected him on a deep level. In the following months after that, he became adverse to all forms of violence. He stopped boxing. he gave up his idea about going into the military. He became a vegetarian, and he lost about 3 or 4 stone in weight. Now, a lot of the time, contactees do get this happen, and it's usually after they kind of realise and they start having these experiences with these beings. Quite common, being a vegetarian, being more protective of the environment and more caring towards animals. This is a common thing that occurs, and you know, it's one of those observations that comes out from looking at a lot of contact cases. Because that doesn't focus on these experiences directly, but I've dealt with lots of other cases which do involve that angle. So yeah, it was certainly Dave's trigger experience, and from that point onwards he started to become aware of what was happening in his life. So move on now to early 2002. I did say that there's some photographic evidence in this talk, and here's a bit for you right here. So the potential UFO photograph here. Right, so okay, this is his daughter, Elise, who I've interviewed as well. She's given me a half-hour interview with his daughter. Some of her testimony is in the report. She's now about 12 years old. And yeah, there's the object. Okay, so she's here, and David just basically just sitting in his lounge one day, just decides to take a photo. Not the best photograph ever, of course, but and he's got some clothes hanging up there that are drying, and you can see here the window, and we've got this net curtain hanging down through the window. When he gets the photograph developed, he realises there's this odd-looking object there. Let's have a closer look at that. There it is. Right. Okay, so you can certainly see there that the shape appears to resemble a kind of classic domed disc, essentially. And it's being seen through the net curtain, yeah. So if it is outside, and I'm not saying 100% that it is, but if it is outside, then that would be why it's kind of dulled colours, because you're looking at it through the curtain. And if it is outside up in the sky, now we've got no way of gauging distance. Obviously, you can see there's not much detail in that at all, really, that can be made out. We've only really got the shape and this sort of general colour. Yes, it could be a smudge on the photograph. Absolutely, you know, Dave certainly believes that could be what it is. However, Dave's had a lot of contact experiences throughout his life. He's had other experiences later on where craft have been seen in the vicinity of those experiences taking place. One was seen by his neighbour hovering over the road where David lived on, and was reported to him from his neighbour. So it's certainly possible that what you're looking at there is an actual craft, that's outside in the sky at the time. Now, Dave doesn't have any recollection of any contact experiences that occurred around this time, but it's, again, certainly interesting that we have a photograph there to look at. So as I said, there's numerous explanations, one of which is that it's some sort of spacecraft. Right, okay. So 2002, so you see, same year as that UFO photograph. A few months later after he's taken this photo. And one day he's in the lounge, feeling quite sleepy. It's a late evening time, and his wife decides to go out of the house and sort of leaves him there. And he drops off to sleep on the sofa. He's been asleep on the sofa for a while, and he comes back round, and he's still lying on the sofa. It's a bit darker in the room, and he senses that something's not quite right. There's this kind of shift in reality, as he calls it. And this is very, very commonly reported with contact experiences. They often start with a change in the surroundings, like everything looks fine, but there's something not quite right, and some people sense a kind of presence in the room. He looks over at the doorway. He looks over the doorway, so he was not paralysed at this point. He was able to lift up and look. He's looking around the room. He looks over at the doorway, and he sees this little guy standing in the doorway. Essentially, that's what we commonly call a grey, one of the more commonly reported types of entity. They're usually about sort of 4 foot high, large black eyes, made famous by films such as Close Encounters and The X-Files and all that. The quintessential look of how an alien's supposed to look like in the public eye. Now, these guys are seen quite regularly with contact, but as I said earlier on, the humanoid types are also seen almost as often as greys. And there are other types which I'm not going to go into at the moment. So yeah, at that point he blacks out. So he turns around and sees this guy, and immediately it feels almost like he's been sedated, and he just drops back off to sleep, and everything goes dark. When he comes round, a number of hours has gone by. His wife is still at the house, and he realises that one of his feet is aching quite a lot. He's getting quite a lot of pain from his foot. He lifts up his foot. He was barefoot at the time, by the way. He lifts up his foot, and on the base of his foot, he sees that he's tried to draw it. Essentially, it was a very, very odd collection of lines and circles, and yes, it does almost look like a crop formation. So there's a lot of circles up here, with these kind of lines going down here, and then another double circle type thing there. So imagine that in red saw lines on the base of his feet. He's got no idea how it got there whatsoever. So let's have a look at some of the possibilities for what that could have been. Was it a previously unnoticed injury? So sometimes you can injure yourself and not realise you've been hurt until you look and you see the cut or whatever, and then all of a sudden it starts to hurt. Now, I did say his foot started aching before he saw it, but even so, had it been something, had he damaged his foot in some way on the previous earlier on that day and not realised, and maybe he had tight shoes on and that was blocking the pain or something like that? It doesn't seem to really fit that. Could he have trod on something while sleepwalking? This is one of the things I put to him, when maybe you dropped off to sleep, you started sleep wandering around your house and you trod on one of your daughter's toys or whatever. But David confirmed that they didn't have anything in the room, there was no Lego or anything lying around that he could have trodden on, especially not something to make a very odd shape like that on the base of his foot. It was quite an extensive, and you can see the amount of his foot that was covered with it, so that didn't really seem to fit either. Was it a medical skin condition? But David's not got any history of having a medical skin condition of any kind, kind of eczema or hives or anything like that. He doesn't, he hasn't had any previous thing. So we just got this to go on that this happened, and it's never happened again since. And it looks too intricate to be a medical skin condition. It didn't really look like a rash. It looked like proper kind of curved lines and circles, which is very strange. So again, the other possible explanation, what we're looking at here, is some kind of marking that he got from an abduction or a visitation. A visitation basically is where the person sees entities in their environment, in their own home like this. So that's a visitation. He's already had that. But when he blacked out, was he then taken aboard a craft somewhere else and had this done to him? Was that the after effect of having some strange instrument of some kind used on his foot? We're never going to know the answer to that. I've dealt with other contact cases where markings have appeared on people. There was one lady where she got a row of 5 dots in a dead straight line. I've dealt with numerous cases where they've had sort of red triangles, quite sort of straight edge triangles. And the markings usually disappear within sort of 48 hours, but very occasionally have been known to leave lasting scars. Right. Okay. I'm going to take you through one more incident, and then we'll have a little bit of a break and a chit chat. So this is another incredible incident that occurred in the summer of 2004, and this one's really bizarre. And you'll see some aspects of this which you probably won't have seen before with experiences. It occurred in an area called the Ghost Fields. That's a nickname that the guys gave for the area where this occurred. So basically a number of grassy fields in the southeast corner of Bicester town, on the outskirts, and they call it the Ghost Fields because numerous people have reported seeing ghosts down at various points. It's kind of quite spooky after dark. You get a kind of low mist and almost like that back. That's not the Ghost Fields, by the way. I just grabbed that because it kind of reminded me of it. So yeah, one evening, him and his friend Ricky, they'd been out to a place called Brill Hill. I don't know if any of you are aware of that. It's in the outskirts of Bicester, and they sometimes go out there sky watching because obviously Dave has had numerous experiences with craft and beings and everything, and he's well aware that this is a part of his life. So he likes to go out and sit under the stars and see if he can spot anything. So they've gone out to Brill Hill, and they were travelling back. It was quite late at night. They were between sort of 10:30 and 11, so not ridiculously late, but it was certainly very dark. And they're travelling along this road, Sharbridge Lane, and they're at this point on the island here, and they look over to the right and they see a glowing white orb of light up in the sky off to the right of the car. It appears bigger than a star or satellite, and this white light is descending, and it's coming down like a falling leaf. It's doing this sort of motion and slowly coming down through the sky. And they clock it, and they're watching it. They're carrying on driving along the road, and this thing is across here over the fields, and it's keeping pace with the car essentially. And they're watching it, and it's coming lower and lower to the ground. There's Dave's drawing of it. There's a car going along, and there's the object. So he's tried to draw this kind of falling leaf type pattern that this thing was doing. I've heard other cases where people have reported this this pattern. So they go a bit further up the road, and this light's coming on down, and they realise it's going to come down. It's going to touch the ground, and it goes down out of sight behind the trees off to the right of the road. So they're driving along here, and it's gone down over here somewhere, and they park up, and they're sitting there in the car, and they're thinking, there's a craft or something over there in that field over there. You know, are we going to go and have a look? Would you? I mean, many of us here would probably be like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to go and have a look. But really put yourself in that situation. It's quite late at night, there's nobody else around, and this glowing white thing just comes down into the field, and you're left with either staying in the car and driving off home and being nice and safe and sound, or getting out and going and seeing what's in the field. Yeah, they sat there about 5 minutes, psyching themselves up. In the end, they decide to go for it. So they exit the car, park here, and they start walk over a stile and come here into the farmers' fields. I've got their photograph. Dave took us out to the location where this occurred when I went down to Bicester for the first time. This is the pathway to the field here, and Dave says it was more overgrown back then. They've kind of cleared it out a bit and everything and made it a kind of more public kind of walkway now. But he said there was some more shrubbery here and everything, but you could still get through. There's the field location. So that was where I showed you with the circle on the map a second ago. So they're standing here in the field. Don't forget it's dark, and it's not like this. It was like after dark. But they can still make out the trees and everything. It was quite a clear night. The stars were out in the moon. And across here, behind this clump of trees, there was this white glow coming from the ground. And it was obvious to them that it was whatever this object was, that it had come down. So again, they stop and they light up a cigarette. And they psych themselves up again because they're quite nervous by this point, and they're kind of wondering, you know, whether they should really go on over there or not. I'm sure if you could put yourself in that situation, how creepy that would have been to be out there in that field after dark and not know what was going on. There's a drawing we tried to draw. It didn't look like much, but it's essentially a white glowing wall. So there's this glow coming from the trees. So this thing had definitely come down. You know, the question is, had it crashed? Was this falling leaf motion due to it going wrong in some way, and was it descending not of its own accord, or was it landing on purpose? That's left open to debate, isn't it? But it's certainly interesting. So yeah, they're looking across these trees and they're sitting there smoking away, and they're wondering whether they're going to go over there. And they're about to kind of they decide they're going to do it. They're going to go and check what's behind the trees, and all of a sudden this happens. Essentially, what they see is a line of about 10 or so figures come out from the undergrowth in the direction of where this white light is. Yeah, he said they're almost alongside one another, but not in a dead straight line, but kind of in a rough line. And they appear to be wearing what look like hazmat suits, or in white suits with kind of proper masks with a sort of face visor over the front. And these figures appear to be marching across the field, almost like they're looking for something. I'm thinking, what on earth is going on here? You know, we've stumbled into some sort of biological outbreak or something. You know, they didn't know what was going on. I mean, the figure certainly looked human, but Dave says the vegetation they'd stepped out from just looked far too dense for them to have stepped out so uniformly. It was almost like they'd kind of morphed and essentially appeared out of the trees. But these figures are kind of walking across the field, and they're just standing there looking at them. They're just going across the field. They're just, what is happening here? About 30 seconds go by, and Ricky, just without saying anything, just points at them. And it appears that they noticed him pointing, perhaps, I don't know. But at that point, one of the beings turns and basically looks straight at them. Right? And at that point, they suddenly get this image in their head. Immediately, they can both see the being's face, but it's right up there in front of them, a few feet away. Dave clearly hears the words, and I do apologise for my French. He hears the words "fuck off" in his mind, a telepathic communication. And he sees the being, very, very, very negative, very like "you're not supposed to be here" type sensation. And the being's face, he said it looked rather humanoid, but the eyes were slightly bigger. And its face looked blue, but he said maybe it was like a blue visor, and he was looking at it and it had a blue face because of the visor. But that's what he heard, and needless to say, he turned and ran. He didn't look at what was going on with Ricky, he just turned and legged it. He knew it definitely wasn't supposed to be there. Runs right the way back to the car. At that point he realises that Ricky is also back at the car. Ricky immediately tells him, when they're being looked at us, I saw its face right up next to my face. It said "Get out, go away" to me. So he'd heard different words, but both of them a sort of very negative connotation. It was almost like their minds were interpreting it into different words, you know. But it was the connotation of sort of you're not supposed to be here. Absolutely stunning incident. Needless to say, they got into the car and got out of there. Dave says he's never seen these beings before or since. He believes that something went on there. He doesn't know whether it was on purpose, because it seems interesting he had all these contact experiences and then he has this incident. But it was almost like something outside of his experiences, something they'd stumbled into by mistake. They definitely weren't welcome there, whatever was happening. And of course the fact that this being had kind of psychically appeared in front of both their faces shows that it clearly wasn't a sort of a standard human. You know, they certainly didn't appear to be human. Absolutely stunning. I've got some testimony from Ricky here. I met Ricky only, I think it was early last year. I went down to see the band, and Ricky spent a lot of time abroad. He's been across Australia for a while, but he was back in the UK, and he come to see the group. And while he was there, I, without any warning or anything, you know, I just pulled him to one side and I said, "Can I ask you some questions about some of the experiences that you've been directly involved in?" He's like, "Yeah, sure, yeah." So we go over to the bar, and I start, you know, interviewing him essentially. And I've got here his testimony, and it fits extremely closely with what Dave told me. In fact, to the letter, I would say. So this is his testimony. In the sky was a big glowing orb falling slowly from the sky, side to side, like a leaf would fall. It looked like it was landing a couple of fields over from the road, so we decided to stop and investigate. We entered one field and looked around and could see the orb was in the next field over, but the trees and bushes were far too dense to make it through to it. We stood and just watched a while. I looked across the field and saw about 9 humanoid beings about 30 to 40 yards away in some kind of white suits walking across the field in single line. One of them turned and looked at us. I felt like he was right in front of my face, and then as clear as anything I hear a voice in my head saying, "Get out, go away." I turned to run away back through the trees and towards the car. At the same moment Dave did the same thing. So you can see there it's a direct correlation with what Dave has told us. I certainly believe this incident took place after speaking with him numerous occasions. You can say yes, it's just testimonial, but in most UFO incidents and contact cases, that's all you've got to go on, testimonial. But believe me when I say I've spoken with Dave for many hours about his experiences, and whenever I ask him a question I get the answer back like that. It's not like he's coming up with another part of the story. Everything he's told me has never wavered. It's always exactly the same. I certainly believe he's talking about a real incident here. So I think at this point it's probably a good chance to kind of have a break and grab a drink and everything. I hope you're enjoying the talk so far, and we'll be back, Sean.